Hello, welcome to the government of United States. Well, in the United States, they have government system, so their system in government is federal. In the government of United States, they have three main branches, namely legislative branch, and then executive branch, and judiciary branch.
The legislative branch is one of the three branches of the United States government, alongside the executive and judicial branches that have the responsibility to represent the interests of the American people and ensure that the government operates within the framework of the Constitution. Legislative branch functions. The primary function is to create, debate, and pass laws that govern the nation. The second, intended to serve as a check on the powers of the executive branch and the judicial branch. The third, providing a system of checks and balance to ensure that no single branch becomes too powerful. And then, legislative branch powers are investigate matters of public concern, impact federal officials, including the president, and control government spending through the budgetary process. The legislative branch of the U.S. government is composed of a bicameral legislature, which means it consists of two separate chambers. The first is the Senate. The Senate is the upper chamber of the legislative branch and is designed to provide equal representation for each state. There are 100 senators, with each state electing 2 senators to serve 6-year terms. The Vice President of the United States serves as the President of the Senate. The second is the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is the lower chamber of the legislative branch and is based on the population of each state. The number of representatives is apportioned based on the population of each state, with each state having at least one representative. Representatives are elected by the people of their respective congressional districts and serve 2-year terms. The Speaker of the House, elected by the members, presides over the House and plays a crucial role in setting the legislative agenda.
The executive branch. The power of executive branch is vested in the President of the United States, who also as head of state. The President has responsible for implementing and enforcing the laws written by Congress. Besides President, the executive branch also consists of the Vice President and the Cabinet. The Vice President has responsible to be ready at a moment's notice to assume the presidency if the President is unable to perform his or her duties. And the Cabinet has responsible for the day-to-day enforcement and administration of federal laws. In the Cabinet, they divide it into 15 different departments. So here's the 15 departments in the Cabinet of government in United States. There are Department of Agriculture, Department of Commerce, Department of Defense, Department of Education, Department of Energy, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Housing and Urban Development, Department of Interior, Department of Justice, Department of Labor, Department of State, Department of Transportation, Department of the Treasury, and Department of Veterans Affairs.
Judicial branch. The judiciary branch of the federal government interprets the meaning of laws for individual cases and decided whether laws violate the Constitution. The judicial branch consists of the Supreme Court and other federal courts. Most states of the United States have a Supreme Court that hears appeals from lower state courts. The structure of the courts and the appointment or selections of judges are determined either by the law or by the country's constitution. The highest state courts of the United States usually focus on correcting errors made in lower courts and therefore do not hold trials. Decisions made in the country's highest court are usually binding. However, when questions are raised regarding consistency with the U.S. Constitution, the matter can be referred directly to the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court. The judicial body headed by the U.S. Supreme Court consists of 9 justices, including 1 justice, who are appointed for life terms by the President with the approval of the Senate. U.S. Supreme Court justices have appellate jurisdictions over lower federal courts and state courts if a federal question is involved. They also have native jurisdictions, for example, function as judges in cases involving foreign ambassadors, ministers, and consuls, and in cases to which U.S. states are parties. Because the Constitution is unclear and ambiguous in many places, critics can often blame the Supreme Court for misinterpreting it.
Elections in the United States. In the politics of the United States, elections are held for government officials at the federal, state, and local levels. All members of the federal legislature, the Congress, are directly elected by the people of each state. There are many elected offices at state level, each state having at least an elected governor and legislature. The country's election system is highly decentralized. Next is levels of elections. The first one, federal elections. The United States has a presidential system of government, which means that the executive and legislature are elected separately. Next, presidential elections. The president and the vice president are elected together in a presidential election. It is an indirect election, with the winner being determined by votes cast by electors of the Electoral College. And then congressional election. Congress has 2 chambers, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Senate has 100 members and elected for a 6-year term in dual-seat constituencies, with 1/3 being renewed every 2 years. And then House of Representative elections has 435 members and elected every 2 years on the first Tuesday after 1st of November. The second one is state elections. State law and state constitutions controlled by the state legislature regulate elections at state level and local level. As a matter of convenience and cost saving, elections for many of the state and local levels are held at the same time as either the federal presidential or midterm elections. The third one, local elections. At the local level, county and city government are usually filled by elections, especially within the legislative branch. Next is voting method. The most common method used in United States elections is the first past the post system, where the highest polling candidate wins the election. Under the system, a candidate only requires a plurality of votes to win, rather than an outright majority. Some may use a 2-round system, where if no candidate receives a required numbers of votes, then there is a runoff between the 2 candidates with the most votes. Since 2002, several cities have adopted instant runoff voting in their elections. Voters rank the candidates in order of preference rather than voting for a single candidate. If a candidate secures more than half of votes cast, the candidate wins. Otherwise, the candidate within the fewest votes is eliminated. Ballots assigned to the eliminated candidate are recounted and assigned to those of the remaining candidates who rank next in order of preference on each ballot. This process continues until one candidate wins by obtaining more than half the votes.
State and local government in U.S. Beneath the layer of the national government lies a complex web of state and local officials and institutions. The nation founders' concern over tyranny transcended their separation of power among the 3 branches of government. State Constitution. The state had Constitution years before the United States Constitution was even written. Since the Declaration of Independence, states have written a total of about 150 constitutions, with several states writing new ones frequently. State constitution tends to be quite a bit longer than the national one, on average of 4 times as long, so they also are more specific. As a result, they often are heavily amended and rather easily tossed out, at least in some states. State official. Each of the 50 states has its own array of public officials, with no two states being exactly alike, but all of them have governors, legislature, and court. Governor in every state. The governor is chosen by a popular vote and must serve 4-year term. More than half of the state put limits on the number of time an individual may be elected, called term limit. Instead, that tends to concentrate power in the hand of a few. Governors have broader authority and more power. State legislature. State legislature vary in size from 20 to 400 and are not necessarily in proportion to the size of the state population. Just as in the national legislature, many state legislators serve for several terms, creating a large body of professional politicians in the United States. State court. Each state has its own court system and must have a state supreme court. Most states have 2 types of court: trial court that handle issues from the traffic fines to divorce settlement to murder, and appeals court that hear case appeal from lower court. Local government. Local government are generally organized in 4 types. Counties. Counties are usually the largest political subdivision, and their primary function is to administer state law within their border. Township. This unit of government do not exist in about half of the state, and they have different responsibility in those that have them. A township may simply be another name for a town or city, or it may be a subdivision of county. Special district. This unit of government has special function. The best known example is the local school district, but other types are growing in number, especially in heavily populated areas where county and city government may be overloaded with work. Municipalities, city, towns, or borough government get the authority to rule only as it is granted by the state. Today, about 18% of the American population live in municipalities and municipal government affect the lives of many citizens. Municipalities may have elected mayors, or they may be managed by appointed city manager.